Hi, welcome back to Let's Play Salesforce. I am your host who gets shaggier by the day, Pete Lyons, and today I am joined by Behzad Ritchie, who is going to tell us all about Einstein Analytics mobile apps. Take it away.
Awesome. Thanks a lot, Pete. Glad to be here and be able to share some cool tips and insights about Einstein Analytics Mobile. So let me share my screen and start. All right, so now that I'm sharing my screen, let's go ahead and get started. So Pete, I thought here's the list of topics I wanted to go over today. I thought we would kind of begin with the basics, and I'll do a demo of the Einstein Analytics mobile app, make sure everyone is familiar with the app, and then talk about management of analytics on mobile, administration, how do you deploy it, and then how to build dashboards for mobile. I'll share some tips and tricks for building mobile layouts. Then we're going to talk about Einstein Analytics in Salesforce Mobile, which is a relatively a new area for us. And at the end, we'll cover what's new and upcoming in summer 20, and we'll wrap it up by some help and resources. So with that, just before we jump into the demo, just a couple super basic points. Einstein Analytics is available on mobile through two different apps. One is the Einstein Analytics mobile app. The other one is the Salesforce mobile app. Einstein Analytics app is obviously the dedicated app that has all the features and bells and whistles for Einstein Analytics. The Salesforce mobile app, as I'm sure most people are familiar with, is the entire Salesforce CRM product on mobile, built on the Lightning platform. It has all your accounts and opportunities, or operational reports and dashboards, and so on. And I'm going to talk about the differences and where and when you would want to use each app a little bit later. Both apps are, of course, available on the Android and the iOS platforms, iOS being available for iPhones and iPads. All right, so let's do a quick demo of the app. So here's the Einstein Analytics app. If you were to download this from the App Store today, this is what it looks like. The navigation is mainly divided in three sections. At the bottom, we have the Analytics tab, followed by Tracking and Notifications. Now, Analytics tab here is our main landing page. This is where we provide you with a list of all your favorites, your apps, dashboards, lenses, and data sets. So one really cool thing about the mobile app is that you can actually view data sets and lenses and do ad hoc exploration. It's similar to the desktop explorer, although not as feature rich. It doesn't have a SACL editor, or it doesn't have a formula editor, right? But all the basic functionality is here. So if you did want to do something on the go, some real quick analysis on the go, you could. So just to show you an example, I've opened up this sample data set. Let's say we want to look at our average CSAT score, and I can group this by, let's say, country. I can sort this data. I can set a filter on here. Let's say I want to only look at the closed cases. And I can change the chart type. So these are all the same chart types that are available on desktop. We even have suggested charts. So we're using countries here. So I'm going to choose this map. And I can also share this snapshot, take a snapshot and share it, or I can save this as a new lens. So that's what I'm going to do here. And let's give a name. So I'm going to say average CSAT by country. Gonna hit save. So just like that, we created a new lens. So let's close that. If we go to lenses, I refresh, we should see this is the new lens we just created. So that's the exploration experience. Of course, perhaps most important is the dashboard experience. This is what most of our customers use the Einstein Analytics mobile app for, to view their dashboards. Just to show you a few examples of what dashboards look like on mobile. Here is one example showing this really cool card design that we've created here. And we're using pages in this dashboard. And the way that works on mobile, you can just swipe left and right to navigate from one page to another, and each page is these individual card designs. So really cool pattern for mobile. Another example to show you is this dashboard. There's a team leaderboard dashboard again, really nice looking, has our KPIs, the hero chart right there on top, followed by some other numbers and the detailed table there at the end. This dashboard is also using the paging pattern, but in a bit of a different way. Here, for instance, I can tap on the bottom where it says team leaderboard, and it's gonna bring up this this table and this panel like so, and I can tap anywhere on top and it's gonna dismiss it and it's gonna go back down. Or for instance, where it says quota attachment, I can tap on view. And again, it's gonna expand that section to show me more details. And then again, I can dismiss that view and go back. So just another way of using dashboards. As you can see, these dashboards are highly interactive and they have all the same look and feel and interactions as you would expect as you have on desktop. Another cool feature, let's say I have this chart here and I want to filter this dashboard by finance. So I do that and I can create notifications right here on mobile. So here's my amount closed this quarter. So I want to set a notification on that. Maybe I call it my quarterly finance revenue. And I want to be notified when this amount goes becomes equals or greater than 4 million. I can remember to put the right number of zeros there. And I can schedule this, say maybe run this notification on a weekly basis, maybe around 8 a.m. Every Monday, for instance. I can go ahead and save that. So we just created a notification on this quarterly amount. And if I close this dashboard, now we go to the second tab here called tracking. This is where I can see all the notifications I've created, and you can see this is that 3.2 million amount that we just created a notification on. And when this threshold is reached, I'll actually receive an email notification as well as a push notification through the app. And any push notifications that you receive, obviously they'll be displayed to you by the operating system, by iOS, but you also see any of the messages that you get here under the notifications tab. So this is sort of the high level demo of all the key capabilities of the Einstein Analytics mobile app. And now that we are somewhat familiar with the app, let's talk about some of the other items we should consider when thinking about mobile and thinking about enabling mobile access for our organization. So I've listed some of the items here, and one of the items that I highly recommend everyone who's thinking seriously about deploying mobile for their orgs do is installing the connected app. And so let's look at that for a second. So here's a documentation for what the connected app is and how you can install it. And the connected app, the reason you want to install it is that it's going to give you a lot of control over how the app accesses the data in your org. And it's going to give you control and flexibility around who uses the app, how your users use the app, and basically how the app behaves, right? So you should go ahead and install this on your org. Here's the link if you want to install it on your production org, and here's the link for Sandbox. It just takes a couple of clicks. You install it for all users, and in a couple of minutes, it should be done. Once the connected app is installed, I'll show you what it looks like. So if you go to your org, go to your setup, and in the quick find here, when I just type connected, you'll see under connected apps, I'm going to go to manage connected apps. And here are the two. One is called Analytics for iOS, Android, and one is called Analytics for iOS. So if we take a look at the Analytics for iOS connected app, for example, these are all the parameters that you can change using the connected app. So things around authentication, maybe you want to enforce some IP restrictions to say, only allow certain IP ranges, maybe within my company's secure network, to be able to log into the app, right? Session policies, like once the user's logged in, how long should they stay logged in before they're required to log back in? You can control push notifications and what kind of content you want to push. You can even set a security pin. You can require security pin so that even if users are staying authenticated, they still have to enter a pin to get into the app. So some extra security measures, which come in really handy. Another really cool aspect of the connected app is this. I go here. This page takes a little while to load. And there's a concept called custom attributes. And what these custom attributes are, if I go back to the documentation here, these are essentially key value pairs that you can define in the custom attributes to turn certain features of the app on or off. So let's say you didn't want anybody sharing the snapshot of a dashboard or a lens, the one I just showed earlier when we were creating that lens. Maybe you want to turn that off. You don't want anybody in your organization doing that. Well, you can do that here. All you have to do is copy paste this key, put it in the custom attribute, and set the value to false. And just like that, you can turn these features off if you have a particular need around security or you have a particular concern. So connected app, highly recommended. It is not required, so you don't have to do this to use the mobile app. You can still use it without doing it, but it gives you a lot of additional controls around the access and how the app connects to your org and uses the data. So the next point I wanted to bring up is this really cool feature, which is documented here. This is a very unique feature for mobile. It's available for both iOS and Android, where you can deep link into the app from another application. The main use case here is for customers who have their own custom mobile apps. And let's say in their custom mobile app, at some point, they want to show an IS Analytics dashboard to their user, right? So without them having to do any custom coding and deal with queries and hitting APIs and that kind of stuff, they could just easily rely on the IS Analytics app to take care of all that dashboard business and displaying and rendering charts. And all they would need to do is create a little link that would launch the IS Analytics app and directly take the user to their given dashboard. So the schema for this URL and how this works is all explained here. And Pete, I'll share all these resources and links with you later so you can share this with your audience. But essentially, it will look something similar to this. So this is just an example that we've put here. And an additional benefit of this is that you can actually pass a dashboard state in the URL. So I can pass a filter or some selections to the dashboard that I'm taking my user to. So I could say, take them to this dashboard and filter the dashboard by their own clients, or depending on what kind of selection they've made in their custom mobile app, pass that data along so that the destination dashboard is also filtered by the same data. Maybe they want to look at a certain account that they're looking at in their custom mobile app and so on. So really cool, powerful feature for mobile, very useful for those customers who have custom mobile apps. There are two other things I want to point out here. One is security. A lot of customers have questions around how secure is the app? How is it storing my data? How is caching working? What about encryption and all that? So I'm not going to go through all the details of that because that could be an hour-long discussion in of its own, but I will share the link to our security guide specifically for the IS Analytics mobile app that has all those details. But what I do want to point out is that the IS Analytics mobile app is built on top of the Salesforce Mobile SDK, the same platform that the Salesforce mobile app is built on, for instance. And when it comes to authentication, network calls being made over secure HTTPS, full encryption at rest, all that stuff is handled by the Salesforce Mobile SDK, and it's all documented in the guide that I will share with you later. So I will highly recommend our admins to kind of review that documentation as they're thinking about deploying mobile. And last but not least is MDM support. So again, because this app is built on top of Salesforce Mobile SDK, it does support all the industry standard MDM providers. And again, what you can do with that and how you do it is all documented here. But basically, the Einstein Analytics mobile app can be configured through MDM. You can change the authentication parameters, define your own custom login URLs, and define maybe you want to use certificate-based authentication and things like that. So again, the EA app is very similar to the Salesforce mobile app in those terms where MDM support is available. All right, so if I just go back here to my presentation, now let's get to the interesting stuff. So what I wanted to cover next is for us to talk about some best practices for building mobile dashboards. So let's go into Studio. And actually, I'm going to bring my phone here as well so we can look at these at the same time. All right. So in Studio, I've created 3 dashboards for us. This is the metrics trend dashboard. This is one of our standard dashboard templates. If you want to know how I created them, if you go to Create Dashboard, you can choose Create Dashboard from Template. And this is the metrics trend template. It's just a few clicks. And once you go through this wizard, you'll get one of these dashboards. And this dashboard out of the box actually comes with a desktop, a tablet, and a phone layout. But I have actually created another version of this dashboard where I have removed the mobile layout, right? So if we go edit this dashboard, this is where all your layouts will appear. So this is when you just create a dashboard, a blank dashboard, the default layout is all you're gonna get. And this is what displays on desktop. And if you want this dashboard to actually look good on mobile, you need to, it's highly recommended for most dashboards at least that you create a dedicated layout for your devices. But just let's go ahead and take a look and see how this dashboard will actually look like on mobile. So one thing to note about the mobile app, you could actually log into multiple accounts at a time. So this is especially useful for admins who may be logged into multiple orgs like their production and their sandbox orgs. So here I'm going to switch to this other account. And let's open this desktop only dashboard to see what it looks like. So basically what I've done here is I've created a dashboard just for desktop, and now I'm viewing it on mobile. And as you can see here on the right, it looks, very similar to what we see on the left, but just things are things are stacked on top of each other, and the layout is not all that fantastic. We can see some things are stretched and on top of each other as opposed to being in the same row. So it's definitely a usable dashboard, but it's not very good looking and not super user friendly either. Like look at all this empty space we have here on top, for instance, right? On desktop, it makes sense to have this empty space here because we can afford to have the empty space. But on the phone, not so much, right? So how do we fix this? Then the way we fix this is by creating separate layouts for different types of devices. So if I'm gonna go here, I'm gonna go to Manage Layouts. And we provide you with some templates down here. I'm gonna choose Phone, give it a name, and hit Generate. And now we have a separate layout. If you look here, we have the default layout and we have a phone layout. The phone layout that you see here is identical to what you see on my phone here, right? Like it doesn't look all that great, and that's because all the system does, it basically puts all of the widgets that you had in your desktop layout, and it puts it in this other mobile layout, and it stacks everything on top of each other. So with very simple dashboards that mainly only have a couple charts and a couple numbers, things might look pretty good. But with most dashboards, especially the more complex they get, more widgets you have, more complex layouts, it's going to require some work to rearrange things to make it look good on mobile. And I'm not going to go through the entire process, but I do want to share a few tips here with you And if we switch back to the original metrics trend dashboard, I can show you what a good looking phone layout for this dashboard looks like. So let's look at the other one on my phone. Now this is a dashboard that actually does have a mobile layout. And as you can see, this looks much nicer. There's not any extra space anywhere. And you know, it's a very nice looking layout. Nothing is looking weird or out of place. And I can navigate to different pages and expand and collapse these different sections because again, we have used multiple pages in this dashboard. So a really nice looking dashboard. Well, let's go back to our not so nice looking dashboard. And let's see what we should do in here. One of the first things I recommend everyone to do when they're designing for mobile, especially for phone, is to change some of the default parameters of the layout. So if you click here on the left where it says phone with the little gear icon, you're gonna get the layout properties here on the right. And the most important thing here that you should change is this property called maximum dashboard width. And you should set this to 375. Now, why do we do this? Where does this 375 even come from? So the reason why we reduce the maximum dashboard width here is because phones are much narrower than this canvas. You know, like if you just look at this, there are no phones that are this wide. And 375 is actually the logical resolution, the logical width resolution of most standard phones. So an iPhone 7, iPhone 8, 10, 10s, all those regular size iPhones, even all the standard Android phones, they have a width of 375. And plus size phones, they can go anywhere between 375 to 414 or 420. So all the plus size iPhones, for instance, are 414. Okay, but you don't need to really worry about all the other phones that could be larger, because this 375 is essentially the minimum width of standard size phones that we have. So if you design a dashboard that looks nice for this width and it works well, then it's automatically gonna look good for the slightly larger devices as well, because the mobile app will automatically just expand things a little bit to make sure everything fits nicely in the screen. The other thing to say about this is that when you set this maximum dashboard width, you're only just modifying how this layout looks like in design time. So in runtime, when you go to the mobile dashboard, it actually doesn't make a difference what this value is set to. You're only doing this to help you design a good looking dashboard as you're designing it, right? And if I can be a little bit more explicit, let me show you what I mean by that. Let's say I didn't have that. And let's say I have this text here, and you know, maybe I wanted to make this a longer title. Maybe I want to say, how are my metrics doing in Q2 of 2020 for X? Let's say X is company. I don't, just some sample text. Now this looks great here, right? But if I go ahead and save this, and now I go to my mobile app and refresh. Oh, actually, I forgot to do one thing. I'm gonna make this skinnier too. Maybe, okay, like that. So now when I refresh the mobile app, you see that the text is truncated, right? And you say, how come? Like, this is showing me perfectly. Like, there's no truncation here. Well, that's because, again, the width of an actual mobile device is much narrower than what you're seeing here. So again, in order to remedy that, I would set this to 375. And when I do that, I see that, oh yeah, like this text doesn't fit in here. So I either need to change this into a shorter title, or maybe change my font size, or make this a taller text widget or something like that, right? So let's go back. So this is the reason why we want to set the width here to 375. Great. So one other thing I wanted to say here is, let's talk about this global filter widget. I would want to first bring this all the way up and maybe resize it a bit because I don't want all that extra space. In fact, I would even remove this title. Like on phone, you see you get the title on top anyway, so there's no reason to really duplicate that, right? So on mobile real estate, screen real estate is super valuable, so you don't want anything wasteful in there. So I would just remove all that extra stuff. Now, let's say I wanted to change this global filter, so I would have 2 filters per row instead of 1 filter per row. So I can just do that easily here. But notice that when I make this change, now I go back to my desktop layout, you will notice that that change carried over to here too. And you're like, huh, I didn't want to do this. I want this to go back to 1 filter per row. And you're like, okay, great. Now this looks good. Let me go back to my phone. And you're like, oh no, not again. Now this has changed back to 1 filter per row. So how do we remedy this? Well, this is sort of a this can be a desired effect or an undesired effect depending on the situation. Sometimes all these widgets are actually shared across all your layouts, right? Unless you explicitly create a widget for one layout and not duplicate it in another layout. So here, this is the exact same widget. So any of the parameters we change for this global filter, it's going to carry over across all the layouts. So again, sometimes this is a good thing because you don't want to keep having to, changing every parameter once per layout. But sometimes you do want to specify differences especially in the visuals of these widgets across different layouts. So in this case, unfortunately, we would have no choice but to actually bring in a different global filter widget in here. So, okay, so I'm gonna delete this. I'm gonna say delete widget only. I'm gonna bring in a new global filter widget. I'm gonna say show me all the global filters. And here we go. So this is great, but of course the styling doesn't quite match what we had before, right? And of course you can set all the filter styles and widget style through the UI here, which is totally fine. But one thing that I like to do is a little bit more advanced. But what I like to do in this scenario, because this is quite customized, like the color of everything has been changed. So I'm gonna go to this advanced editor for my original widget. And I'm just gonna copy, these are all the parameters of that global filter widget. I'm gonna copy the segment. Now again, only do this if you're advanced and you're familiar with JSON, you know what you're doing. If not, just stick to doing things in the UI. But if you're an advanced user, you could just easily copy this portion, go back to our new global filter widget, go to advanced editor again, and replace, paste this in here and replace those parameters and hit save. Again, just be very cautious when you do this, but as long as you know what you're doing, there's no harm in doing that. So one thing we want to change here, because since we copied over the parameters, we want to change the filters per row to 2. And lastly, I want to set the widget style to use defaults. And now we have a filter panel that looks just like my original one, except now I'm able to have the 1 filter per row here and then 2 filter per row in the phone layout. Great. Let's go ahead and save this and let's look at this on our device. And actually, let's make this just look a little better. So again, I'm not going to go through the whole thing because that's going to take some time. But let's say, just want to resize these a bit and I'm going to move everything up. So if you notice, all these widgets are actually placed in a few container widgets. I can select them all by holding the command button and move them all at once. Perfect. And this is one of the benefits of using container widgets as well. So I would highly recommend you to use container widgets as much as possible, at least for the sake of designing mobile layouts. Let's go ahead and hit save. Refresh our dashboard. Great. Now this is looking much better than the first dashboard we saw. Obviously these items here don't look fantastic either, but they just require a little bit of like resizing and moving around, right? So I'm not going to go through all that to save some time, but I did want to show something else. These global filters are fantastic, but they're taking up some space, right? And we can imagine in some dashboards, you may have way more filters. You might have 8 of these, 10 of these. Well, there is something really cool you can do. You can actually just delete this widget altogether. Make sure you just say delete widget only, because we do want to keep the filters. And let's save that. Now, if we go back to our dashboard, let's refresh. The widget is gone, so we could use this space. We could bring up all these other widgets, right, to make use of that space that we just freed up. If you notice on top here, there's a button. This is our global filter button. I can just tap on that, and then I have access to these global filters at all times. So the really cool thing about this is that this can save me some space in my dashboard layout, as I don't have to have those filter pills be present in the layout itself. And then I also have access to those filters no matter where I am. So if I had scrolled all the way down in this dashboard, right, and if I want to access those filters, I don't have to be like, oh, now I have to scroll all the way back up to make the change. No, I can be at the bottom here while I'm looking at something. I want to be like, oh, maybe I want to change this filter. So I always have easy access to these global filters without the widgets being present in the layout explicitly. And this is a unique feature of the mobile app that does this automatically for you. Okay, great. The other thing I wanted to talk about was paging. So there's a few different patterns that emerges with paging on mobile. So first, let's talk about this other dashboard that I've created here. So this is the same dashboard. I just played around with the layout a little bit, and I divided these 4 metrics into 4 separate pages like so. It's a really simple dashboard, obviously, but just to show you as an example. So in this dashboard, I have created 4 pages and done nothing else to provide any sort of navigation for the user to navigate from one page to another, right? So if you do that, this is what's going to happen on mobile. The mobile device is going to automatically provide you with a way to navigate between those pages. And you see these little page indicators at the bottom. So these show you that there are 4 pages. This is quite a standard paradigm on mobile, especially for iOS. And now you know that you can swipe between these pages just like you can do on your mobile home page, right? So I can easily just navigate between these pages, and I didn't have to do anything special or extra here to provide a means of navigation between those pages. So that's the default behavior. Now, if we go back to the original dashboard, this is the dashboard without me modifying it or doing anything to it. This dashboard also uses 4 pages, but it's using paging a little differently in that we're using these link widgets to provide navigation to other widgets, right? So if I click on this discount %, for instance, it's taking me to the 2nd page. If I click on total price, it's taking me to the 3rd page, and so on, right? So in this case, the mobile app realizes that you have sort of created your own navigation paradigm for these pages. So in this case, it's not going to provide you with that paging carousel behavior. Now you can just use this dashboard as it was intended. I can just tap anywhere here where it says discount % to expand that page or navigate to that page, or I can click on total price and same thing happens. So that's another way to use paging. So this is really useful, like for sort of creating this accordion effect that we're doing here. It's also useful for, let's say, if you wanted to have a table at the bottom of your dashboard somewhere, but maybe you want to hide that table by default, so you could sort of create 2 separate pages and have a button to say show details, hide details, and you could easily do that to basically display or hide that table. Same thing for filters. You could maybe have a dedicated page for all your filters, and then expose or hide the filters using the 2 pages. Or otherwise, you could do the card effect, which I also demoed at the very beginning, to have like these separate pages, and each page sort of has a single card or a single view of your data, and you can navigate back and forth between those pages that way. And the third paradigm, another thing you could do is you could just use a navigation widget. So this is this widget on the bottom. So this also does some of that work for you. So if you just pop in a navigation widget here, then it will automatically create the navigation bar here, which you can of course style and configure as you like. And then if you do this, also of course the mobile app will respect this as well. Cool. Another tip that I want to share with you is around this scenario where you've created a dashboard that doesn't have any mobile layouts yet. It's essentially a desktop-only dashboard. For a variety of reasons. Maybe you just aren't ready yet. You haven't created the layout for it yet. Maybe you don't want it to be available on phone for whatever reason, right? What you can do in that case, you can actually hide this from the mobile client. And the way you do this, you go here on this overflow menu on the right. You go to dashboard properties, and you can uncheck this available on mobile parameter. And if we save that now, and if we go back in the mobile app, if I pull to refresh, you'll see that dashboard just disappeared from my list of dashboards in the mobile app. So I wouldn't even be able to see and access that dashboard on mobile. So that might also be useful in some cases if you want to hide certain dashboards from the mobile app. Last but not least, let's talk about performance a bit. Performance is super important on mobile, of course. It's important on desktop, but even more so on mobile. And you always want to kind of keep that in mind when designing these dashboards on mobile. And that using pages is one of the ways we can help performance. So that way you're breaking up your dashboard in multiple segments, so not all of it needs to load up at once. So that using pages is a fantastic way to improve performance. And one thing I want to mention is if you use SACL queries, if you write any custom SACL, make sure you always include a limit in your SACL statement. Because if you don't specify a limit, and let's say you have a table that's backed by a SACL query, and you could get tons of results, a large table could really hamper the performance of the mobile app. And when I say large, I'm talking about several thousands rows of data in that table, right? So we recommend generally setting a limit to something around 500. You could go up to 2,000. It would be a little slow, but not too terrible. But if the limit is anything above 2,000, you're gonna start to see a poor performance. And on that topic, one cool feature that I wanted to share with you on the mobile client, if you click on top on that profile avatar, on the right, you see we have the settings option. So if you go to settings, you see there's an option here called performance settings. If you go to performance settings, there's an option that says shake device to view perf data. This is off by default. You can turn it on. And when you do that, let's say you have a dashboard that is being kind of slow on mobile and you're trying to figure out why, you can just load that dashboard up on the mobile client and then shake your device. You can't see me, but I was just shaking my device. And when you do that, you get this performance report. You see the total duration it took for us to load that dashboard, so about 2.5 seconds for this particular dashboard. And then you can see the breakdown of everything that's going on and how long each operation is taking. Now, don't try to add these up and see if it adds up to this duration, because they won't. A lot of these operations are being done asynchronously in parallel at the same time. But what you want to look for in here is essentially look for things that are taking too long. If this dashboard was taking 30 seconds to load, there's a good chance that there's a few items in here that are taking maybe 10, 20 seconds to process. And typically those will be things around network. So like you might see load asset bundle or load dashboard bundle. If you happen to have a really bad connectivity at the time, you might see maybe, maybe the network call is taking 5 seconds, 10 seconds. Then okay, there's a problem with your network connection, right? Another thing you want to look for is run step. So run step is every time a query gets fired or we run a query to get the results, you'll see this. So if you have tons of these and some of them are taking a long time, you might want to think about simplifying your queries or reducing the number of queries that you have so you can optimize your queries that way. Also, if I scroll down, let's see, you might see things like widget parse results. And this is when we get the results back from the server and we're trying to process it to display it in that particular widget, right? If you have that large table with 10,000 rows of data that I was mentioning earlier, you might see this in several thousand milliseconds, so a few seconds. So then okay, like this table maybe has too many results. I need to set a limit there to reduce the number of results, improve performance. So again, this perf report can become really handy in troubleshooting performance issues. All right. So I think that's all I wanted to cover with building mobile dashboards. And I actually have a best practices guide for mobile that I'm going to share with you, Pete, which is going to cover some of the things that I just covered right now, plus some more. So that would be good to share that with our audience as well. One other thing I wanted to point out here is our mobile features page. Again, around documentation. This is a great page to reference if you want to know what are the features that are supported in each app for iOS and Android, and also like compare that with desktop in case there was a feature that was available in desktop but wasn't on mobile. Currently, as far as the dashboard viewing experience goes, pretty much all the key functionality is available on both iOS and Android platforms, but there are some small caveats here and there, so I would encourage you to look at this page as well. Okay, so the next thing I wanted to cover is the Salesforce mobile app. So let me go back here and let's go into full screen mode just to make this a little bit easier on the eye. All right. So I'm going to go into the Salesforce mobile app and I want to show you what the IS Analytics experience looks like in this app. So here we are on the Salesforce app and you can see that these are all my tabs that I have in my navigation. I have my accounts, opportunities, contacts, and so on. One key use case for IS Analytics in Salesforce Mobile is embedded dashboards. And let me show you what that looks like. So I'm going to go and look at an opportunity record. And you can see that within this opportunity record, I have embedded a dashboard. And it's taking a little while to load. All right, so now that we are in this opportunity item, we can see that we have an embedded dashboard right here within the record page. And if I tap anywhere within this dashboard, it's gonna launch me into this full screen view of the dashboard, which is exactly the same dashboard viewing experience that we had in the IS Analytics mobile app. Now you have it in the Salesforce mobile app. So again, a fully mobile, native, user-friendly dashboard. You can, of course, interact with and change filters and selections, all that kind of stuff. I can go view details and see another dashboard. So this is one main use case for Salesforce app, to be able to view and interact with these dashboards in an embedded context. And The second thing I want to talk about here is the analytics tab experience. So if you notice, analytics is my first tab here at the bottom, and this is totally configurable in Lightning. So I'm in a Lightning app where I've configured analytics to be my first tab, and so that's why it's showing up here. And if you notice, this is very similar. In fact, it looks identical to the home experience that I was showing in the ICE Analytics mobile app. So if you're a user of the Salesforce mobile app, you can actually get access to your full list of apps and dashboards for ICE Analytics right within Salesforce mobile app. The only thing you might notice here is that datasets and lenses aren't available to you, and that's because exploration and doing that ad hoc exploration, that's sort of a more advanced use case where we have kept it just for the advanced users in the ICE Analytics mobile app. But other than that, the dashboard viewing experience is the same, and you have all the features and capabilities available to you here as well. Another specific use case for Salesforce, a special capability for Salesforce app, is around actionability. So let's say in this dashboard, I have this table where I'm pulling data from my opportunity data in Salesforce, and I'm able to take actions on these records. So when I make a selection, you see the button says actions at the bottom. I'm going to go ahead and tap that. And here I've configured actions to be available on 2 columns, on the account name and the opportunity name columns. So for instance, I can say choose account. And these are all the actions that I can trigger on this particular record that I have selected. So let's say I want to create a new task for myself to maybe follow up with this customer. And just like that, I was able to go directly to a task, to this new task window from the dashboard view and take an action on a particular record. So this is a very powerful feature, and it's sort of a specialty of Salesforce. So the embedded dashboards and its actionability is what really makes the ICE Analytics experience unique in the Salesforce mobile app. Okay, so having gone over what the ICE Analytics experience looks like in the Salesforce app, let's talk about, like when and why should you use the Salesforce mobile app as opposed to EA mobile app. So as I mentioned, if your use of ICE Analytics relies heavily around your CRM and you have embedded dashboards within your records, then you definitely want to use Salesforce mobile app. Actionability, again, is unique to Salesforce Mobile. There is some actionability in the ICE Analytics mobile app, but the last leg of it to actually trigger those actions actually rely on you having the Salesforce mobile app as well. So that's another use case where I would recommend you to use the Salesforce mobile app. Also, if you're in a regulated industry, and this mostly applies to our customers in the financial and banking industries, where they have some strict policies around mobile app management, and they have some special security needs, which the ICE Analytics currently doesn't cater to. The Salesforce mobile app actually does have an option. This is a separate license, a separate SKU. It's called Mobile App Plus, that if customers have this Mobile App Plus and want to have those extra security features, then they would use the Salesforce mobile app and then rely on the Salesforce mobile app to get access to all their ICE Analytics data. And these extra security features are things like jailbreak detection, or if you want to like enforce a minimum OS version for all your users, right? So things like that are advanced security configurations, those will have to be done through this separate additional license, which is available in the Salesforce mobile app. And if your use case doesn't fall within any of that, then I would say go with the ICE Analytics mobile app. If you have a more advanced use cases, if you want to do data exploration, go with the EA mobile app. If you have a custom mobile app and you want to configure and deploy the deep linking that we talked about earlier, go with the EA mobile app. There's also some other extra features that aren't available in the Salesforce app currently, such as notifications. And because the ICE Analytics app is just a more focused app, it doesn't have all the functionality that the Salesforce Mobile has. Salesforce Mobile has all your Salesforce objects and records and contacts and events and tasks, all that stuff. Because of that, so if your use case is just mainly around Einstein Analytics, it's best to use the EA mobile app because that's going to give you the more streamlined, more seamless user experience. Okay, great. And last but not least, Pete, I want to just share what's the latest with our Summer 20 release. So I'm going to show you that now. All right, so this is the brand new Einstein Analytics mobile app that is coming out in the Summer 20 release. You'll notice that it looks quite different than the current app. We have a new tab here called Home. This is all brand new for the mobile app, but hopefully not brand new to you because it's very similar to the home experience that we have on desktop. So on top here, you have your recents carousel where you have all your recently viewed dashboards. Of course, you can go to view all and see a list of all your assets. We have added an all tab here, which is a heterogeneous list of all of your different asset types combined in one list view sorted by access date, so most recently accessed on top. So this might be useful to some folks as well. And if you go back, then you see here you have all of your favorites, and I can swipe here to look at all the items that are shared with me and even items that were created by me. Okay, so this is a new home experience, and we still have the browse tab. So if you go to browse, then this is very similar. In fact, it's identical to the experience that we have in the app today, although the UI has just been streamlined a little bit, and it's a bit more modern looking. For instance, if I go here to look at the details of a certain app, for instance, you see that we're using this iOS 13 style a modal view as opposed to the previous older one that we had. So just a little bit of a modernization here with the UI. And the second big thing that I wanted to talk about, let me see. Yes, so the second thing is watch list. I just want to make sure I was on the right account. And watch list, some of you know, is a new feature that was released on desktop in the spring release. It's currently a beta feature, and we have now brought it into the mobile app with a lot of really cool improvements and features. So my other demo org kind of got messed up, so I don't have really exciting data to show here, unfortunately. But just because you see the flat lines and the 0%. But watch list is a really fantastic feature to track all your KPIs and the metrics that you care about all in one place, and then also be able to see how that data is changing over time. And so, for instance, if I click on any of these, we get a more detailed view where I see the current value of this metric. I see the change compared to yesterday, and then I have this trending timeline chart here in the middle, which again shows me how the value has been changing over time. Again, apologies for the lame data here that is not changing, so we just get a flat line. And then we have these period over period calculations shown at the bottom, showing us the change of the metric over different time periods. And from here, I can also click on the source dashboard at the bottom to go to the source dashboard where I added this item to my watch list from. So really fantastic feature for mobile. I hope everybody turns this on for their org in the summer release and starts using it. Just a little hint that you see a beta feature coming to mobile. There's a hint that it might be going GA soon. So keep that in mind. Yeah, those are the two biggest features that I wanted to demo. There are a couple other new features that are coming in the mobile app as well. For instance, support for pivot tables is now available in the iOS mobile app, which previously wasn't available. So now if you have any pivot tables, you'll be able to view those on the mobile app. And last but not least, we also made some performance improvements for loading dashboards, mainly around those large tables. I kind of talked about that earlier. So now if you do have dashboards that use those queries with limits set to 10,000, 20,000, if you have those kinds of tables in your dashboards, those dashboards are actually going to load much faster than they used to before. I still recommend you to optimize on those dashboards yourself and do set a lower limit. But if you do have them, they are gonna perform better after this release. All right, so I think that is all. Last but not least, I kind of put a few links in here, which I'll share this with you, Pete, so you can share this out. These are some of the important links that I think everybody should be aware of if they're thinking about mobile or if they want to kind of dig deeper in some of the subjects that I covered today. And that is all for me, Pete.
All right. All right. So my first question, how come that, I mean, because this was a pretty long presentation, how come your phone still thinks it's 9:41 this entire time?
That's a fantastic question. Yes, that actually can get really confusing. So I'm using QuickTime to present my phone here. Let me get out of full screen mode. And this is just the default behavior that QuickTime does. It always puts 941 here, and it always puts the Wi-Fi symbol here. So even if I were to like disconnect from Wi-Fi, it's still gonna show the Wi-Fi symbol. And I've actually like demoed like some offline features before where I put my phone in offline mode, but this is still showing this. So like then somebody might think that your presentation is fake because you're actually like connected, but you're not. So this is just like the status bar that QuickTime puts on here, just so all presentations look exactly the same.
Cool. All right. So my next question, now we did talk about minimum versioning at one point, but I'm also just going through in the list of the order in which we recorded. Is there, now I know that we can set security policies with the mobile app plus for just Salesforce core, but in general, is there a hard line in the sand as far as minimum Android and iOS versions or minimum specifications of the device itself?
Yeah, so as far as the hard line in the sand goes, our mobile apps only go back to a certain OS level. So for instance, like our iOS app currently supports anything from iOS 11 and above. I believe the Salesforce mobile app supports iOS 12 and above. So actually the EA app is a little bit more relaxed in that sense. And that sort of, we typically on iOS tend to support obviously the current most latest version and then 2 versions back, right? So iOS 14 is going to be coming out very soon. It will most likely go GA around September timeframe as it does every year, but that all depends on Apple, of course. So once that happens, usually a couple months after that, we will add support for the latest one and then remove support for the previous one. So we'll remove support for iOS 11 and add support for iOS 14. And Android phones, again, we typically try to stay as broad as possible, so we support the most number of devices as possible. But then again, depending on when Google deprecates certain Android OSs, we also drop support for those OS versions. Yeah, I hope that answered your question, Pete. I don't know if
well, the other
there.
piece, like, and I mean, I assume it's kind of a similar thing with hardware specs. I mean, if your phone is less than a few years old, it should probably work. Anything further back, mileage may vary.
Yeah. So that one is typically not an issue with iOS because just there's so much less variety with iOS devices, right? So as long as we just say like we support iOS 11 and above. So as long as you have a device that can run iOS 11, it's supported by us. So we don't typically really go by device. We go by the OS version, and then whatever the whatever Google or Apple decides are the devices that should support that OS version, then we support all those devices as well. It's
Yeah.
similar approach for Google. It becomes a little bit more difficult with Google because like sometimes you have really low end devices that are also like 7 years old, and you can really run into some problems with those. And that's when we try to like we look at the data to see like from all of our users that we currently have, all of our customers, you know, what's like the 98%, 99% of devices that we could support. We try to be as broad as possible, while again, like we have to keep in mind, like, are there any security concerns with any of the older OSs, anything that we should be worried about? And based on that, and again, based on like when Google decides to deprecate certain OSs, then we'll say, okay, now from here on out, we only support, Android 7.0 and above, for instance, depending on those timelines.
Yeah, I mean, you'd be amazed what you can actually get Linux to run on, and
Yeah.
like I saw this one. It was like the kids' toys with the little like VTech or whatever it is. It was some
yeah.
old device from the early '90s that had like a black and white like 240 screen that you could basically, with just a little bit of soldering, you could get it to run Linux. And it was mostly just you had to basically solder a USB port onto it, and it would run Linux.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't think that you're gonna have much traction getting Einstein Analytics to run on that guy though.
Yeah.
So
Be surprised.
So we did kind of talk a lot about design paradigms and just the difference in the experience, because mobile interface is completely different from a desktop interface. Obviously, we're going from a keyboard and mouse to a touch screen, change in real estate, even just change in orientation. But one feature that I always kind of wonder is hover, and for tooltips, because when you had a tree, at one point you had a tree graph, and we could only see the name and amount of the largest value. And the amount you can kind of eyeball by the size of the rectangles, but
Right.
Is there a way without clicking into a segment to drill into that and really know what that is, since we can't really hover?
Yes, I'm so glad you asked this question because I should have actually talked about this and I forgot. So let me see. Let me just open one of these dashboards. So yeah, that's a really great point, and that's one of those things where when we're designing these dashboards and trying to figure out what options we want to turn on and off for these different charts, we want to always like take that into consideration. Think about like how are these labels going to get truncated on mobile, and how will the user be able to see all these values and so on. But we do have a feature that I can demo on any of these. Let's use it on this chart because this chart doesn't have any labels. We do have a feature where if you just, first you have to tap on a chart to make it active, like I've done here, right? So right now this chart is inactive. I tap on it, you get the little blue border around it, and it becomes active, right? Now, if I tap on any of these charts, it's going to select that bar, and then it's going to show this chart tooltip. It's going to show me the value, right? Like, okay, so this was the close date, won, and sum of total price is this much, right? So this is good, but it's not great because it's kind of slow, like to go one by one to tap on each one. And also the effect that it has, as you can see, this chart above it keeps changing because the rest of the data is getting faceted by my selection here, right? So how do we do true hover on this chart? Well, we have this really cool feature where you can just tap and hold your finger, and then you get a little haptic feedback on the device, which is hard to demo because you can't feel it, but you just tap and hold on any of these bars, and then you drag your finger across. And right now, I'm dragging my finger slowly over these bars. And as I do this for each one, again, the phone gives me a little haptic feedback. So I know when this tooltip is updating, and I can see the values for each bar. Like I can go really fast over it, so you can see it changes super fast. I can go really slow and kind of look at the different values of this chart without triggering any selection in the dashboard. So this is a really cool way that you can accomplish that same hover functionality on mobile.
Awesome.
And this is sort
Yeah,
of a hidden feature, so I'm super glad you asked that question.
that's a really, really clever way to address that problem. Because like that's something where I'm always like, well, you know, how do you translate input, like the behavior of a swipe, to a click and drag?
Yeah.
But so my next question involves a dashboard that you showed at the very beginning called My Goals. And there was some range widgets on there.
Oh, yeah. I was afraid you were going to ask that. Okay. This one, right?
Yeah, so first we'll go with what I think. We'll go back, we'll come to this one in a second, because that one I do want to know about.
Okay.
But how do you achieve that color gradient on the bars?
Ooh, the color gradient. Yeah, that is done. So that is done through conditional formatting. And
Oh, okay. Yeah, this feature
yeah,
is supported on desktop. You're saying I just wasn't aware that we could do that on bar charts. You're basically you go to conditional formatting,
right.
you select the measure, and you say this is my high color, this is my low
Yep,
color. That's
exactly. And
so that is supported on desktop. That's a really, really cool feature.
yeah,
So
both desktop and mobile that support it. Yep.
I'm gonna try that. That's got a really nice like eye appeal to it.
Yeah,
So
for
now
sure.
let's talk about this range widget. And before you tell me what's really going, or the gauge widget,
The
before you
gauge
tell
is
me what's really going on here, I think I have a guess. One of two things is happening.
yeah,
Either you have some feature that we don't have,
yeah.
or you're using the layered widget hack and you have your layout set to 50 columns and fine.
Yeah, so this dashboard is just meant to be like a design aspiration dashboard. And yeah, the way that this was achieved was by using the z-index hack and kind of putting 3 gauge widgets on top of each other like this. So yes, this is a bit of a hack. I wouldn't necessarily recommend you doing this. But with this dashboard, I just mainly wanted to show this carding, the card design.
Oh, but that's so cool though.
But
So
it
like
looks really cool. Yeah, it's really cool. And if you can get it to work like they've done here, then you can do some
it
really cool things.
from a development perspective, leveraging this feature is quite frustrating because at different releases, I've found that the number of layers that you can get good behavior on changes. It is
Yeah.
not officially supported, but
Yep.
it does show up in at least one of the desktop templates. So that means it's technically out there. But yeah, we've known about this one for years, and it's because of the way the container widgets render. So for basically the dashboard or the engine goes from the top to the bottom and tries to load all the widgets, and as soon as a widget has a step that hasn't run yet, then it says, okay, hang on, we're going to wait then. So your containers load first, and then everything else gets layered on top of them, and that's why this is supported. So you basically just got to make sure that your widgets are in the right order in the JSON, and then you just modify their column, their row and grid properties. But
Yep.
if you try to drag them in the UI,
No, yep, that
they
wouldn't work.
explode
Yeah.
like too many chickens in the same spot in Minecraft.
Yep.
So definitely advanced, not best practice, but I must say it is absolutely beautiful.
Yeah, for sure.
Next question. So I feel that you did answer this one, but when we were talking about MDM, but I did just want to have it explicitly called out. With a little bit of work with connected apps, is it reasonable to assume that it's a fairly straight lift to enable SSO?
Yeah. Yeah, for SSO, you wouldn't really need MDM. Yeah, you can just set that up through the regular connected app. And so if you would go, I take you to our login screen actually, you wouldn't really need to do anything for mobile specifically. At least I don't believe you do, because you could just use this option, use custom domain. And if you have custom domains set up, that could take you to your own company's SSO page, and you can log in through there. What you can configure specifically on mobile, you can set it so that it takes you to browser to authenticate. I think some companies like SSO services or the authentication page requires you to do that. I'm not 100% sure why, but I do know that it is possible that if you change the settings in the mobile configurations in the admin setup page, you can set it so that when you try to authenticate here, it will actually take you to browser. You authenticate in the browser using presumably the customer's custom SSO page, and then it will kick you back. Once you log in, it will kick you back to the app, and then it will authenticate here and land you in the app.
Yeah, yeah, and again, while we were like to the end of the point of MDM, it's like, okay, if it works with MDM, then SSO is totally not going to be an issue. But I just wanted to make sure, like, because it's a very important thing to companies, and it's a lot of times it's really just they want to know what the extra lift is, and what I'm getting is not much at all.
No, yeah, for SSO there shouldn't be any problem. It should really just work out of the box.
So next question, for deep linking, does the dashboard states parameter, does that support selecting which page the user lands on, or is it still just going to be the default page, and that's really just for the context of passing in filters, similarly to how we do it with embedding directly into record detail pages?
Yeah, that's a great question. So currently, no, you can only pass filters and selections. You will not be able to define the destination page. There might be a way to, I'll have to ask my engineering team about this. There might be a way to hack that specifically for the mobile app, but it's definitely not, we don't actually support it. But I'll ask around, maybe there is something we could do there. I know that this has been asked both for desktop and mobile to be able to, take the user directly to a page. And we do support it through, the built-in link widget that we have. You can use that to say, take me from this dashboard to this dashboard and take me to this page. But yeah, with the deep linking, that's not supported at the moment.
Yep, I want it for desktop too.
I know.
Next question. So the global filter widget, also really great tip, using the advanced editor to copy widget properties back and forth. There's this bug that I occasionally run into with certain compare table scenarios where I can't get the widget properties to let me change the chart type. And what I figured out what I could do was create a different step just got the chart looking the way I wanted, use the advanced editor and swap out the step name. So my question though is, I typically only go to that sort of length when the normal hacks don't work. So is there a reason that we don't just either use the remove step from widget feature, or just clone the widget, thus by breaking its linkage to the one on the other layout?
So let me see if I follow. I don't think I followed the question exactly.
Can you go to the dashboard where it was my metrics, and this guy right here, and then show me your global filter widget.
Okay, so we had this one, right?
Yeah. So if I wanted to separate this from what was on the desktop one, but still preserve the properties, I could either copy the widget. So right there, if you just,
yep.
So there's those, and it preserved everything except, oh no, the background's coming from the container. The background of the widget is transparent. So
yeah.
So and now that should separate it. And that should actually achieve the same result without using the advanced editor. Yep. And then the other one would be if you so now if you change that guy to 2 per thing, that should achieve the same result. So then we check back on desktop, boom. And then the other way that you could do it is go back to the phone layout and select your widget, and in the move add, there's a drop down to the right of it. Oh no, it's not there. It might not
Yeah,
work
this
on
is
global
just for
filter. No,
pages.
there's usually an option in the right where you've got edit, advanced editor, and copy. There's a remove widget or a remove steps. So it's like if you want to
Yeah.
change the step that it's come. Yeah, up on the right
Yeah, let's
in the
see.
dots. It's not there.
Remove
Remove
query. Yeah,
query.
yeah, yeah.
It's not
Yeah,
supported on global filter widgets. That's a
yeah.
thing. Okay. All right.
Yeah, totally. You're absolutely right. Yeah, copying this would have been much easier. I think I just wanted to show the advanced query editor because in some instances you will need to use that.
And because the
Uh,
advanced query editor is a super cool feature that we should show all the time, and
that's right.
it's taking me a lot to adjust my muscle memory and to not do Control E. And I want to do a video about
Yeah,
the eventual deprecation of Control E. Like, what do we really need it for? And these days it's just, do you want to copy the whole JSON of your dashboard to back it up? Do you want to do a mass find replace?
yep.
And that's really, or swap out, mass find replace. So like swap out a data set ID or something. But I'm running out of reasons where I need to hit Control E at all. So
Yep, that's
regardless of whether or not there was an easier way, that was still a really cool trick and I enjoyed it.
awesome.
Why does that filter button not work on desktop? So when you hide the global filters, we can still filter the dashboard. Why don't I have that for desktop? And I get that it could be potentially counterintuitive because with a mobile app, like if you don't see the thing that should immediately be there, you're almost programmed to look in the dots or the hamburger or whatever you want to call it for their, hey, if I've got additional options, this is where I'm going to find them. But in desktop, we do kind of have that mindset that I'm going to have a filter panel. It's going to be at the top, or maybe it's going to be on the right, or maybe it's going to be on the left. But it's going to be there. So that does make sense, but I am a bit jealous of that feature. Also, I'm jealous of that carousel. That is tight. We don't have that for desktop either.
Which one? This one, or are you talking about this
Pages
one?
carousel.
Oh, the Pages carousel, yeah.
You have that too?
That's
oh
right.
my gosh. I actually no, I must have been writing notes, or I've got like a page and a half of notes and questions here. I must have looked away when you were showing that.
I may have not shown actually, but yeah, this is another cool little thing that on mobile, we sort of enforce a minimum width on these pills. So if you had 10 filter pills in here, like on desktop, in this much space, they might get crushed and become super small. So that's why you would change the filters per row. But on mobile, we enforce this minimum width, but then instead we make the entire container scrollable. So you get this kind of an effect.
What's also cool about this is a good example of what happens if you take a standard, or if you take a dashboard that was not deliberately designed for mobile and convert it over, because this is sales performance out of sales analytics.
Yep.
This is typically one of the top 3 dashboards that I'll show in any first call. I'm going to show a client Einstein Analytics and they've never seen it before. This dashboard's going to go on the screen. Also about the pages carousel, do we lose the ability to use this carousel feature if we use a different form of navigation, such as the navigation widget or link widgets?
Exactly. So you only get that carousel if you don't have a link widget that points to another page, and if you don't have a navigation widget. If you do either of those two, then you lose the carousel.
So what would happen in the use case of, because this is something I do all the time, when I'm creating dashboards with multiple pages to have kind of a tabbed experience, I always forget to add the link to the other pages. And so I go from page 1 to page 2, and then I'm like, oh, I'm stuck. But there is kind of a use case for that also. Sometimes now we have versioning and publishing, so that's a little bit different. But one way that I would work on a dashboard in development would be by creating a page that users don't have access to, so that I can just check something on the fly, or tell other admins, okay, this is ready to go. And it's totally not best practice. This is another example of Pete using everything he shouldn't use as a clipboard. You really should just clone it into a different app or whatnot. But
Right.
if you, long circle back to the original question, let's say that I have a dashboard with 3 pages, but I only provide the users with links to pages 1 and 2. Will that mean that they are not able to access page 3 from without editing the dashboard, similar to what you would experience on desktop?
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
So at runtime, outside of the builder, like on mobile, they wouldn't be able to get to that 3rd page if you didn't provide a link navigation to it.
Yeah. So the moral of the story is, be it mobile or desktop, if you want users to be able to leverage the awesome insights that you have built, make sure they can get to the page. Next.
And of course, you can always mark pages as hidden as well, right? So if you have a page just for yourself, it's under development or something, you could hide it.
And that's very useful when we're talking about the navigation widget, which instead of you explicitly calling out, this is where this goes, that's where that goes, it's just the table of contents. It's also another really underloved widget, where I find that people tend to forget just how easy and awesome that widget is. Next, I love Shake. I know you got to turn it on, but for a few reasons. One, like, how often are you like, my phone's a piece of crap, I'm gonna shake it to figure out what's wrong? Except never in my life have I seen that actually do something.
Yeah.
But it's like such a common human response that if something isn't behaving correctly, you shake it, maybe you listen to it. Maybe not with a can of soda, but I've shook my phone before, somehow instinctively thinking that was going to help. So this is similar in its purpose to the dashboard inspector that we see on desktop, but this is far, far, far more robust, because it's giving us a much more of the sort of stuff that you would need to dig into the Chrome debugger to actually get. And but also enriched by things like, this is how many milliseconds this particular query took to run. It's almost like a blending of the feature set provided by those 2 different elements. So my questions: one, is there do you know if there's any intent to eventually bring like this kind of robustness over to the desktop? And then 2, is this something that you can export?
So as far as desktop goes, I'm not sure. I would have to follow up with the product manager for the builder team to see if they have anything like that in the roadmap. For mobile, honestly, we built this initially just for ourselves, like several years ago. And then we were like, yeah, this is super useful. Let's actually like expose this to everybody, like to admins building dashboards. Like, this is really helpful. Not everyone may understand what each of these things are, and they don't really have to. My advice is just like, look at what's taking the most amount of time and then kind of dig deeper there. And usually it's a run step or some of those widget parse results parameters here. But your second question, you mean export this feature or export the report?
Yeah, export these metrics.
Yes.
And
so
for me, it's really just like pacing myself kind of thing. Like, a lot of times, and I wish there was just in general a better way to do this, but I had a build where we were talking about some extremely high volume external data sets that were just, there's like 3 of them on the same dashboard, and they're all tied together with a million like bindings. And then we dropped it on a record detail page. We also had pick initial selections filters and embedded filters passing in. I swear the load time on our first iteration was close to 45 seconds. We eventually got it down to about 3.5.
Nice.
And so just being able to benchmark myself as I tackle a problem, like I just feel like it'd be fun to have like a cheat sheet over time.
Yeah, for sure.
I can't actually think of any practical reasons why I would need to download this.
Yeah, there actually are. So that's actually a good example. But so it is possible. So you see this report here on top. So if you tap on that, it actually allows you, it saves it as a text file and it lets you email this. Now the default behavior is that we're saying send this to us because you're seeing some perf issues. So if you're seeing a perf issue, you can use this and this will report it back to us. So I will receive an email actually, or this will go into our system and I'll get a notification about it. And then I can look in here to see what's going on. So if a customer is having a performance issue and they file a case, this is one way we try to help them debug the problem. But there's nothing stopping you from doing this, and just don't email it to us if you want. Just put in your own email address, like email it to yourself, or just access the text file here. I'm not sure if that's actually possible. So you might have to just email it to yourself.
Yeah, I could just
Yeah,
send it to myself.
yeah, just email. It doesn't. I thought you would be able to view a text file here, but it doesn't look like it. But yeah, you could just email it to yourself and then look at it. You know, So yeah, this would be helpful for yourself, but also helpful like if you want to complain to me and say, Bezad, why is this dashboard so slow? Like help me figure it out, and feel free to do this and send this email, and you can let me know, and we'll be happy to look into it and see what's going on.
Cool. So next question. It seems almost from the like what is supported versus what is not supported list, almost seems like you guys are showing iOS a little more love. And I thought it'd be fair to ask, is there a technical reason for it? Is it market share? Like, how come us Android folks don't have as many check marks?
Yeah, I know that's a valid question to ask. iOS does typically get a little bit more love, and the reason behind it, yeah, it's around mainly market share and just the resourcing. We have way more iOS users than Android users, at least for right now. As we expand, as iSanalytics becomes more popular in internationally in Europe and in Asia, we are getting more Android users, but still the iOS users totally outweigh the Android users. So that sort of affects how the priorities are set, and that sort of affects how the teams are resourced a bit. So on top of that, the other thing that is missing here is the history behind this, is that when we launched iSanalytics or Wave at the time back in 2014, we only had an iOS app, right? And it took us 2 years to then create an Android app, or not that it was like technically took us. It just like in the beginning, it was a brand new product. We had to go really fast. The team was small, and then as we grew the team, and as we started getting customers asking for Android, then we thought, okay, like we should develop an Android app. So in all fairness, the Android app had a 2-year lag behind the iOS app, right? So that's another reason why there is some feature gaps between iOS and Android.
And honestly, that is a totally reasonable answer, because if we look at if we look at the bigger picture, you build for your 80% of core use cases first and most heavily. Yep. Because if you want to give everybody your features that like in just the most bespoke custom way that they need it, then what's going to end up happening is that you'll have one feature that everybody can use instead of 100 features that 80% of people can use, and then a little bit of a curve at the end. So exactly. I'm just fine with it. It's okay, but I did have to ask, where are my check marks?
And one other thing, Pete, I'll say about that is like, may have not seen like the Android app getting too many updates recently. And again, that's because of our efforts going into integration with the Salesforce Mobile App. So everything that I demoed today in the Salesforce Mobile App for iOS, that's what my Android team has been working on for the past couple of releases. And that's coming out very soon. It's going to be GA in September. So once we get that out of the way, we're going to kind of shift focus back to the Android EA app and kind of speed up our feature delivery into the EA app as well.
And so then I think this is self-evident, but worth Warren's mention. the goal is always full feature parity, right? I mean, if we can do something, and obviously you're never trying to build a development experience on a
Yeah.
phone because, you know, frankly, you kind of need a keyboard and mouse for that.
Yep.
But as far as the what the end user can do, the general goal obviously is always parity. But it seems like the interesting thing is, well, how do you tackle something that just there is no translation? You know, and the hover was a great example of you guys coming up with innovative solutions for how to solve this translational problem between, you know, because a lot of times it's just there's this misconception that, well, it works on a desktop, it should work on my phone. Well, why? Well, because I pay for it. Okay, well, how? Well, I don't care how. You know?
Exactly. Yeah.
I mean, I'm guilty of this all the time. If it doesn't work on my phone, I'm probably not going to do business with your company. That's my thing. So
Yep.
my last comment is yes, I too had lame data when I showed watch lists because I didn't think you know, like in your case it broke. In my case, I never bothered to set it up. So when I talked about watch lists for my new release coverage, I just talked about them and even pointed out that I have totally no data for this whatsoever.
Yeah.
But you at least had a little bit of data. I had zero.
Well, I have I actually have, I'm using this on our internal org to track all of my adoption and performance metrics for our app. I just can't share that data in a demo. So I can totally vouch for it. It's such a super useful feature. But yeah, I just couldn't share that data. For demoing purposes, one thing I did is again, in the separate demo org, I had set up the event monitoring app and I had the adoption app. And that's a really easy one to do if you wanted to get some data that changes, because I just, you know, set some watch list items and the number of like dashboard views I'm getting, and just for even a just demo org, because I have multiple users accessing the demo org. So that's an easy way to actually get some real data that changes even in a demo environment. But that's what broke, and I couldn't show that.
All right, so that's all the questions I had. Thank you again for joining us. This is some amazing content, and we're definitely looking forward to what we're going to see in subsequent releases. And really appreciative of all the work you and your team do to putting both like so many different things. We've got apps for this and apps for that, and an app that goes into the app that's for both of them. So again, thank you, and you know, this has been Pete, and go ahead and say goodnight to the audience.
Awesome. Thanks so much for having me, Pete. I really enjoyed it. Thanks, everyone.
All right, please like, subscribe, and as always, thanks for watching.